Morning, Highlands, Presbyterian, on this, the fourth Sunday of Advent, as we look ahead to the Christmas Eve service this Saturday and to Christmas morning service next Sunday. We are still in Advent, that time of the year when we are celebrating the coming of Christ, but also looking ahead to when Christ comes in fullness. And so we're looking ahead to Christmas. And how many of you are going home for Christmas or have family members that are coming home to you, right? Christmas is such a great time for that family members gather around the table, they gather around the tree, we spend time as a family. Reminiscing about moments in the past, about Christmases long ago, thinking about the future that we all have in our mind. You come home and everything feels right. Well, it does sometimes. Going home for Christmas changed for me not long after I got married. Right around the same time as when my parents got divorced, and it changed what it meant to go home for Christmas. When we lived in Chattanooga or Atlanta, we'd often drive to Cincinnati. Maybe we'd stay with Rachel's family, and we'd be bouncing around from place to place to see my mom, to see my dad. And it wasn't the Christmas I remembered as a kid. It was different. And it will never be quite the same. What it means for me to go home for Christmas means something entirely different than it used to. And I know I'm not alone in this regard. Many of you have dealt with this or are dealing with this, the way that life changes, and it's not the same to go home. And the holidays can be hard. When the home you imagine isn't what it once was or isn't what you want it to be, sometimes Christmas can be a particularly challenging reminder of that. And I don't have an easy answer except to say that Advent is exactly the season to speak to those of us who know that concept of going home isn't perfect at Christmas. Advent, as we discussed, it's reminding us that we live in this in-between time. God has come to us in fullness on that first Christmas, but God will come to us again in the future, and only then will things be set fully right. Until then, the reality of our brokenness is present. It's with us. We carry it. We see it in the world. It's why we have this ache inside of us when we look at the world around us, the world within us, because we know that this isn't our true home. We know that it's not the way it's supposed to be. We know that we were made for something perfect. Augustine put it so well when he says our hearts are restless until they find their rest in God. Like Joseph and Mary traveling on the road to Bethlehem, we've been called to go to a certain place. And we're all itinerant wanderers until we reach that destination. In Advent, we look around and we remember this. We talk about it while celebrating that Christ has come. We look forward to the day when Christ will come in his fullness, in his perfect glory, and all will be set right. And our scripture passages today from Matthew 11 and Luke 1, they're reminding us of what our true home is really like. Because what happens is we spend time and the world distorts our vision. Think of it like you're on a spaceship traveling to the moon. This may surprise you, but I've never been in a rocket heading to space, but I've read enough about it to know that the view of Earth from space is incredible and awe-inspiring and spectacular. And I would imagine it's something you could get lost in, just staring at the green and the blue and the brown and the white, and staring at that from space, you could get lost in that. And it would be easy to do that and lose sight of the goal. To be so focused on the beauty of the earth that you lose sight of the goal. And also the earth's gravity is pulling you back towards it. And so when you chart that path to the moon, you have to take that into consideration and recognize the pull of the Earth's gravity. And you have to keep focused on the goal. You can appreciate the beauty, but you can't get lost in it. And our spiritual life isn't so different. And in our baptisms, we're claimed by the waters of baptism, and our destination is set. We know our true home. It's written in our hearts. And throughout our lives, we live into that. Our course is set towards God. We talk about the process of growing in faith. We call it sanctification. But along the way, we get distracted by the shiny things in earth. All of earth's glory and beauty distracts us. And it's easy to lose sight of the goal. The earth's gravity pulls us in. And I don't think I'm the only one that feels how strong that is, particularly around Christmas. Because there's so much, you're buying gifts and you're often trying to keep up. And there's all the events and you're racing from here to here to here. You're scheduling all these events. You're coordinating thing after thing after thing. And you're so busy trying to keep up with it all that you get worn out and you lose sight of the goal. You lose sight of the true reason of Christmas joy, and you simply feel weary from it all. The gravity of the trappings of the season keep us from being elevated by the joy that sits behind all of the season. Our eyes aren't fixed on the glory of Christ. And so the gospel writers are reminding us of that. And you're using the words we find in Luke's gospel for Mary. He has looked on the humble estate of his servant. He who is mighty has done great things for me. His mercy is for those who fear him. The words of Mary remind us of the greatness of God, of this great act that God has done. The words are meant to be a stop sign on the busy and chaotic road that you're on. So you pause and remember who it is that has done such great things for you. Think about it. If Joe Biden called tomorrow and elevated you to the most prominent and powerful position in the entire country, it would be but a shadow of a reflection of the glory of what has truly happened to us in Jesus Christ. God, the creator of the universe, has reached down and done something incredible, something remarkable. In spite of the humble trappings that surround us, sin was not a barrier that prevented the love of God from reaching us. So Mary is reminding us of the greatness and glory and selflessness and grace of God. But Luke and Matthew, they added more than just that. They're not only trying to help us stop in our journey and remember our goal, to help our hearts recognize the cause of the true ache for home, but they're also trying to help us recognize ways to see God at work in the busyness of all of our lives. We're trying to figure out how to orient our lives around Christ, and Matthew and Luke are helping us see the ways that God works most often in the world. John the Baptist, what he did is he was wondering, is Jesus the true Messiah? And so he sends his disciples to ask. And Jesus points to the type of work that Jesus was doing. And it's the same type of work that Mary talks about God doing, feeding the hungry and serving the poor. And Jesus is telling John's disciples, just like Mary is telling us, that's the ways that it's most clear that God is at work. And that's the way that we truly identify that Jesus Christ is God, by the way that he serves, by the miracles that he does, but it's the communities that he finds himself in. God has been at work in these communities for 2,000 years, and so the gospel writers are telling us that if we want to have a better understanding of how God is at work in our lives and in the world around us, don't seek after the proud and the powerful, but look for opportunities to serve, to spend time with the weak and the hungry and the poor. And in selfless service to these, this is where God is seen most clearly. And so if we want to help our hearts understand their true home, we need to grasp these two things. One is that we are weak and helpless, and only out of free grace does God reach out to save us. And the second being that we then are called to serve just as freely as we are served by God. And that, the gospel writers tell us, is how we will help ourselves and our hearts to see God at work in the world. And so this Christmas season, as we think about what it means to have a home, both our temporary homes and our heart's true homes, may we find a better understanding of what it means to create community through service. when I was in college and I was going home to Christmas, and the home was in this transition phase, and it was different. The one place that was home was the small church, the congregation that I grew up in, and that was always home. Those people who served through love faithfully year after year welcomed me home. How can you do that for someone else? How can we do that for one another? How do we serve one another? How do we recognize those in need and serve them and welcome them? And then how do we extend that to the community? How do we recognize those who are in need in the community, in our neighborhoods? And how do we reach out to them? How do we serve them? Maybe it's personal contact. Maybe it's finding organizations in the community and reaching out and making bonds with them, spending time in service, donating, sharing resources to them. It looks like a lot of different ways, but this Advent, may we look forward to the idea of our true home. And may we think about how we can serve the poor and the weak and the hungry and the needy, because that will train us to help understand better how God is at work and how God is creating our heart's true home. And may that bring us our Christmas joy. Thanks be to God.